Amazing reasons why small arguments develop into huge fights between couples. Hi friends, welcome to Marriage Realities, a comprehensive relationship channel. Today's video will be looking into the reasons why small arguments between you and your spouse develop into huge fights. It would be a blatant lie if you say that you do not argue with your spouse. It is because arguments are part and parcel of any marriage. Since you and your spouse have different outlook towards life, there is constant clash of ideologies between you. This cannot be prevented in your relationship. Arguments between you happen for many reasons. When you have a minor difference of opinion with your spouse, you argue with him or her. When you're tired and fatigued, you unintentionally flare up in anger against your spouse. When you're irritated by the behavior of your spouse, you argue with him or her. When you have work-related stress, your mental tension makes you argue with your spouse. When your spouse does something that rubs you the wrong way, you feel irritated. Any such situation can make you flash out in anger against your spouse, and he or she might retaliate back. When your anger is momentary, you say a few harsh words, sulk in a corner, and do not speak with each other for some time. After your anger disappears, you apologize to your spouse. When your spouse accepts your apology, your arguments end then and there. These are all normal behavior in any marriage because this sort of a scenario happens to even the most compatible couples. You need not worry about it. You'd be a liar if you say that you do not have such arguments with your spouse. Life has become hectic in this modern age and you're constantly stressed and tense by your work-related problems, money problems and relationship problems. Your intense stress level often makes you feel edgy and tensed. Mostly you do not feel angry with your spouse, but you're intensely angry with your situation. When your arguments have a short lifespan, it adds spice to your marriage. It is because the aftermath of your argument is always the romantic making up with you and your spouse apologizing for the hurt inflicted. Your romantic making up feels thrilling to both. But what if you extend your arguments a little further than needed? When your arguments extend and lengthen, it turns into bitter fights between you. Bitter fights between you are dangerous to your marriage. Arguments are mild while fights are bitter. Arguments are momentary while fights are outbursts of suppressed anger and resentment against your spouse. Arguments with your spouse are over within a few hours while fights extend for days. Arguments are easily forgotten while fights leave a scar. When your arguments have a tinge of insult in it, it intensifies the anger and resentment of your spouse. When you utter demeaning words against your spouse with the deliberate intention of hurting his or her feelings, you're already taking your argument to a higher level of hostile fights between you. When you derive sadistic pleasure by your power to hurt your spouse, it just means that there's something more than anger behind your arguments. When you make a big deal out of a small relationship issue, the atmosphere between you becomes all heated up. Your constant fights become a worrying relationship issue when you have a lashing tongue and you're ready to war with your spouse for almost everything. You would not tolerate your spouse, you would not listen to him or her, and you would not let go your arguments. Your anger is so intense that you demand an explanation from your spouse. But when your spouse offers an explanation, you're unwilling to accept it. When you're not ready to accept a truce to bring your arguments to a stop, it will naturally evolve into huge fights between you. When you extend your arguments into bitter quarrels which extends for days, your spouse feels oppressive and shackled in his or her relationship with you. Here are some bitter reasons behind the volatile fights with your spouse. When you have outgrown your spouse, your fights are bitterly fought between you. When you're bored with your spouse, you constantly fight to show your boredom. When you mentally drift away from your spouse, you feel like arguing with him or her for almost everything. When there are constant arguments between you, respect, tolerance and adjustability bids goodbye from your married life. When the essential qualities your marriage needs for survival disappears, there are regular fights between you. You do not talk with each other for days. In your bitterness against your spouse, you do not want to end your fight and you restart it with renewed vigor again and again. Verbal and physical abuse becomes a constant happening in your relationship. When such bitter fights become a fixed scenario of your married life, your relationship loses all its stability features and crashes towards its inevitable defeat and failure. When your arguments with your spouse ceases to be normal and becomes bitter fights, all that is left in your relationship is a debris of your lost married life and lost love. It is indeed very strange and sad that you take your married life so lightly and you're not bothered to make it work. When you make a big issue out of the small differences with your spouse and ruin your marriage, you make a mockery of the love you had for each other. Your unrealistic expectations about your spouse place the culprit in making your marriage fumble and tumble towards its inevitable failure. When you do not understand your spouse from his or her angle, you'll only feel whatever he or she does is always wrong. When your spouse does not understand you from your angle, he or she feels you're always in the wrong. So, can you see that both do not understand the emotional needs of each other? When there is no understanding between you, both will wrongly assume many inner meanings into the most innocuous arguments that happen between you. When both have such misunderstanding between you, mild arguments in your married life develop into fights and brawls to finally end in a divorce court. Arguments between you add spice to your marriage, but fights are like cancer which eats into the goodness of your relationship. You're entitled to argue with your spouse when you differ from him or her. But when you extend your arguments into long and bitter fights, you'll be only ruining the love between you. Did this video make you understand how arguments are normal in your relationship, bitter fights are abnormal and must be avoided at any cost? Marriage Realities will have many such relationship eye-openers. Subscribe to my channel to understand your marriage in a new light. Press the bell icon for updates about my latest relationship videos. Make love forever until death do us part your relationship goal.